She didn't even look up from her clipboard when she said it. "This floor is for members only." Lorraine Asante Webb had heard those words before, not in those exact syllables, but in that exact tone. The particular flatness of a voice that has already decided, before you've opened your mouth, that you don't belong. She adjusted the strap of her bag and stood very still in the doorway of the Hartwell Club's second floor. The kind of stillness that comes not from uncertainty, but from having made a decision. "I have a reservation," Lorraine said. The woman at the welcome desk, a young woman in a blazer the color of burgundy wine, her hair pulled back so tight it looked like it hurt, finally lifted her eyes. She looked at Lorraine the way people look at something they weren't expecting to find in a particular place. A crow on a wedding cake. A rainstorm in July that someone forgot to schedule. "I'm sorry," the woman said, and she didn't sound sorry at all. "This level is reserved for platinum members and their invited guests. Can I direct you downstairs to the main lounge?" Lorraine had driven 4 hours from Sudbury to Toronto that morning. She had buried her father 3 days before that. And in between, she had spent 11 hours reviewing a contract that now sat in the leather portfolio under her arm. The contract that would transfer ownership of the Hartwell Club, all 4 of its locations, and the 43 hectares of Muskoka lakefront property attached to the flagship location into a charitable land trust that her father had spent the last 6 years of his life building. She had not come for a fight. She had come to sit in the room where her father used to sit, just once, before she signed his life's work away to the people he had always meant to give it to. "My name is Lorraine Asante Webb," she said. "I believe I'm on the membership list." The woman turned to her screen, tapped something with 2 fingers, and waited. Then tapped again. "I'm not finding you," she said. "Try Asante," Lorraine said, "or Webb." More tapping. "I'm sorry, I really don't." "Try the founder's suite guest list," said Lorraine. "Under Kwame Asante." A pause. Something had shifted, not in her expression exactly, but behind it. A small recalibration. "One moment," she said, and reached for the phone. The Hartwell Club had been founded in 1987 by a man named Jeffrey Hartwell, who had made his money in aggregate and sold most of it before the market turned. The club had been his retirement project, a private dining and recreation facility in downtown Toronto that catered to what Jeffrey called a discerning clientele. What he meant, and what most people understood without him having to say it, was a specific kind of clientele. The kind that didn't need to be asked twice before they felt comfortable. Kwame Asante had joined the Hartwell Club in 2001 as a platinum member, which at the time was a category that didn't officially exist. Jeffrey Hartwell had created the classification in the same week that Kwame's check arrived, because the existing tiers didn't have space for what Kwame represented. He wasn't a guest. He wasn't a regular member. He was, as Jeffrey put it privately to his general manager, a substantial partner in the operation. What Jeffrey meant, and what the paperwork confirmed, was that Kwame Asante had purchased a controlling interest in the Hartwell Club, all 4 locations, for reasons that had more to do with what he planned to do with it eventually than what he intended to use it for in the meantime. Kwame had grown up in a house in Scarborough, where the heat sometimes went out in February. He had graduated from the University of Toronto with a degree in civil engineering, gone north to work on mining infrastructure, and spent 30 years making decisions that other people got credit for. By the time he came back south with enough money to buy the Hartwell Club outright, he had developed a certain philosophy about wealth, which was that it was most useful as a tool for transfer rather than accumulation. He hadn't bought the club to use it. He had bought it to give it away. The plan, his plan, the one he had spent 6 years documenting and legally structuring with the help of a very patient estate lawyer named Bertrand Marcoux, was to convert the properties into a land trust administered by a coalition of Indigenous and Black community organizations in Ontario. The club's facilities would remain operational, but the proceeds would be redirected toward affordable housing development and cultural programming. The membership tiers would dissolve. The discerning clientele clause would be struck from the operating agreement. He had died in April, 8 weeks before the transfer was scheduled to be completed. of a heart attack that his doctor described as sudden, and his daughter described as not surprising at all, given that the man had never once in his life stopped working. Lorraine had flown home from Vancouver, where she worked as an urban planner for the city, and had walked into her father's affairs the way you walk into a house after a long time away, recognizing everything and finding it slightly wrong. Slightly smaller than memory, full of tasks that didn't announce themselves. The signing was scheduled for Thursday. Today was Tuesday. She had 2 days, and she had driven to Toronto because she wanted to sit in the Hartwell Club's second-floor dining room, which her father had described to her once as the room where they didn't want me, and then they needed me, and I never made them feel bad about either. That was Kwame. He carried no bitterness. Lorraine was still working on that. The young woman with the tight hair returned to the desk and picked up the phone for the second time. She spoke quietly into it, turned her back to Lorraine, and said something that Lorraine couldn't hear but didn't need to. The body language was enough. Lorraine sat down in one of the chairs by the elevator and took out her phone. She had 17 unread messages, 4 missed calls from Bertrand Marcoux's office, and 1 text from her daughter Simone that said simply, "You okay, Mama?" She typed back, "Fine." Sitting in the lobby of Grandpa's building, getting told I don't belong here. He would have found this hilarious. The elevator opened and a man stepped out, mid-50s, in a suit that cost more than Lorraine's monthly mortgage payment, talking loudly into his phone about a tea time. He walked past her without looking down. The woman at the desk straightened when she saw him. That automatic shift, the slight brightening, the posture adjustment that people don't know they're making. Then, a second woman emerged from a door behind the desk. Older, a different blazer, a different quality of authority. Her name tag read, C. Hargrove, Member Sterbs Director. She looked at Lorraine with an expression that Lorraine had seen before and could read accurately. She was trying to decide at a glance whether this was a situation that could be handled gently or one that was going to cause paperwork. "Mrs. Asante Webb?" she said. "Yes. I'm Caroline Hargrove. I'm so sorry for the wait. I understand you're here as a guest of a platinum member." Lorraine looked at her for a moment. "I'm not a guest," she said. Caroline Hargrove held her smile. "My father is Kwame Asante," misunderstood. "My father is Kwame Asante," Lorraine said. "I'm here in connection with his membership and his ownership interest in this property." The smile stayed in place, spamfit, but something behind it shifted again. The same small recalibration as before, but bigger this time. "I'm so sorry for your loss," Caroline Hargrove said, and this time she sounded like she meant at least part of it. "Thank you," said Lorraine. "I'd like to sit in the second-floor dining room for an hour, that's all." "Of course," said Caroline Hargrove. "Let me just. Give me one moment, I'll need to verify." "You'll need to verify that I'm the daughter of the man who owns this building," Lorraine said. "Yes, take your time." Lorraine had not inherited her father's patience. She had watched it in him her whole life. That ability to wait, to absorb, to let other people arrive at their own conclusions without accelerating the process. And she had admired it the way you admire a language you never quite managed to become fluent in. What she had inherited was his precision, his instinct for which detail mattered, which contract clause would cause trouble 18 months from now, which structural issue looked cosmetic but wasn't. She had built a career on that inheritance. In Vancouver, she had been part of the planning team for 3 affordable housing projects in the downtown East Side, 2 of which had won national design awards, and one of which her father had read about in the newspaper and called her about at 7 in the morning, still in his bathrobe she was certain, to say, "Your name is in the paper. It's a good feeling." She thought about that phone call while she sat in the chair by the elevator and waited for Caroline Hargrove to return. She thought about the drive up from Sudbury, which she had done in near silence, with the radio off and the windows cracked and the October trees doing what Ontario trees do in October, which is to burn beautifully for a little while before letting go. She thought about the contract in her portfolio and the 6 pages of her father's handwriting she had found in the desk drawer in his study. Not a legal document, not a letter exactly, more like notes to himself, written over what looked like several years, about what he wanted the land to become. Not a club, he'd written. Something porous. Something that lets people in. The elevator doors opened. Caroline Hargrove stepped out, and with her was a man Lorraine recognized. Not personally, but by the particular quality of his posture. He was tall, older, with the careful grooming of someone who'd been attending to appearances for a long time. She could see him processing her as he crossed the lobby, assembling an interpretation. "Ms. Asante Webb," he said. "I'm Edmund Cresswell. I'm the general manager of the Hartwell Properties." He extended his hand. "Please accept my sincere condolences on the loss of your father." Kwame was. He was someone this club was very fortunate to know. Lorraine shook his hand. "Thank you," she said. "I apologize for any confusion at the door," Edmund Cresswell said. "Our front-of-house staff should certainly have." "I'd like to go upstairs now," said Lorraine. He nodded immediately. "Of course. Please." The second-floor dining room at the Hartwell Club was quieter than she expected. It was mid-afternoon, past the lunch service, and most of the tables were empty. A few members sat here and there. An older couple near the window, two men in their 40s talking over what looked like blueprints, a woman alone with a book and a glass of white wine. It was a handsome room, warm wood, brass fittings, tall windows facing west. The light at this hour came in at a low angle and turned everything a certain shade of amber. Lorraine sat at a corner table that had a view of the street below and ordered a coffee. She took her father's notes from her portfolio and set them on the table, not to read. She had read them 11 times already, but to have them near her. Edmund Cresswell had retreated with appropriate discretion. Caroline Hargrove had not returned. The young woman with the tight hair, whose name Lorraine had noticed, finally, on a laminated staff card clipped to the welcome desk. Caitlin had not reappeared either. The coffee arrived. The server, a young man named, according to his name tag, Devon, set it down with a small shortbread cookie on the saucer and said, "Can I get you anything else?" "No, thank you," said Lorraine. "This is perfect." She held the cup in both hands. Outside the window, King Street moved at its usual pace. Cyclists, delivery vans, a couple walking a dog so large it was almost architectural. Toronto in October. She had grown up here. She had left at 24 and come back for holidays and funerals, and one or two moments of crisis, the way adult children do. She wondered what her father had thought about in this room. Whether he had sat at this window. Whether he had ever felt like he belonged here, or whether belonging had simply stopped being the point at a certain stage. She thought it was probably the second thing. Bertrand Marcoux called at 3:15, as she was finishing her coffee. "Are you in Toronto?" he said when she picked up. "Yes. I came up early." "Good," he said. "There's something I should have mentioned sooner, and didn't, which is that we've had some contact from a member of the board of the club, Edmund Cresswell specifically, who has become aware of the scope of your father's estate plan, and is expressing some concerns." "What kind of concerns?" "The kind that involve his own lawyer," Bertrand said. "He's not challenging the ownership. The documentation is airtight, but he is. He is making it known that he believes certain aspects of the transition would be, and I'm using his word here, premature." Lorraine looked at the city through the window. "He had 32 years to discuss this with my father," she said. "He did," Bertrand agreed. "And my father didn't adjust anything in those 32 years." "He did not." "Then I'm not sure what Edmund Cresswell's concerns have to do with Thursday." There was a pause that Lorraine recognized as Bertrand, organizing his thoughts. "They don't have anything to do with Thursday, technically," he said. Legally. I just wanted you to know the temperature before you sat across from him." "I already sat across from him," Lorraine said. "He was very polite." "He usually is," said Bertrand. She thanked him and set her phone on the table. Devon had reappeared without being asked and refilled her coffee. She appreciated that. Edmund Cresswell found her again at 4 o'clock. He came to the table with the careful unhurriedness of a man who had rehearsed his approach. He asked if he could sit. She gestured to the chair across from her. "I wanted to have an honest conversation," he said. "If you're willing." "I usually am," said Lorraine. He was quiet for a moment, arranging his hands on the table. "Your father was a remarkable man," he said. I don't say that as preamble. I mean it. When he came to us, when he acquired his interest in the club, there were people on the board, myself included if I'm honest, who didn't fully understand what his intention was. We thought this was an investment in a certain kind of life. It was an investment, Lorraine said. Just not in the life you assumed. Edmund nodded slowly. He never said anything to us about the trust. Not directly. He participated in the club, he attended board meetings, he paused. He was unfailingly gracious. We never had reason to think that he was waiting, Lorraine said. Edmund looked at her. Yes, he said, that he was waiting. She picked up her coffee. He wasn't a patient man, actually, she said. People thought he was because he was quiet. But he wasn't patient. He was purposeful. He knew what the end point was, and he was working toward it, and other people's timelines didn't change his timeline. She set the cup down. He waited 32 years because it took 32 years to build the legal and organizational infrastructure to make the transfer work. Not because he was comfortable waiting.
Edmund was quiet. What is it? You're hoping will change on Thursday?
She asked. He looked at the window, then back at her. Honestly, nothing, he said. I know the document is legal. I know your father's wishes are clear. I came here because I wanted to understand. And I think I wanted to tell someone who was connected to him that I was sorry we didn't ask him more questions. Lorraine considered that. He might have answered them, she said. He might not have. He was private about the things that mattered most to him. She looked down at the notes on the table, the pages in her father's handwriting. He wrote here, in these pages, that he never wanted anyone to feel like they owed him an explanation for what they didn't know. He thought that was unfair. He thought people mostly did their best with what they had, and it wasn't useful to hold them accountable for information they didn't have access to. She paused. I don't know if I agree with him, but that was his position. Edmund was quiet for a long moment. What will it become? He said, finally. The property, housing, said Lorraine, cultural space. The Muskoka property is going to be returned to a partnership of 3 First Nations communities that have been asking for that land back for 40 years. The Toronto locations will be converted. The buildings stay, the programming changes. There's a detailed plan. My father left detailed plans for most things. Edmund nodded. It sounds like him, he said, even though I didn't know him well enough to say that with confidence. That part you can say with confidence, said Lorraine. He stood, extended his hand again. Thursday, he said. We'll be ready. She shook his hand. After he left, she sat for a while longer. The room was emptying out. Devon had cleared the table behind her without making any sound. The couple by the window had paid their bill and gone, leaving only the 2 men with the blueprints, deep in some technical disagreement that involved a lot of pointing. Lorraine picked up her father's notes. She read the last paragraph again, not because she had forgotten it, but because it still landed differently every time. I am not giving this away because I am generous. I am giving this away because I understand that I was never supposed to be the last stop. Everything I have ever held was in transit. The point was always to know when to open your hands. She folded the pages, tucked them back into her portfolio, and closed the clasp. She left a cash tip for Devon, a generous one. She took the elevator down. The lobby was quieter now. Caitlin Price was still at the welcome desk, and she looked up when Lorraine passed, and for a fraction of a second something crossed her face. Not quite recognition, not quite apology, but the beginning of both, which was at least something. Lorraine walked out into the October afternoon and stood for a moment on the sidewalk, letting the cold air settle around her. Her phone buzzed. Simone again. How'd it go? She thought for a moment about how to answer, and then typed. The room was exactly like he described. I'll tell you about it when I get home. She put her phone in her pocket and started walking south toward the parking garage. Thursday was 2 days away. The papers were ready. The lawyers were ready. The 43 hectares of Muskoka lakefront, the 4 properties in 3 Ontario cities, the endowment that her father had structured across 7 years of careful financial maneuvering, all of it was ready, had been ready before he died, which was the kind of thoroughness that Lorraine recognized as something she had also inherited, and had always thought of as a gift. She thought of what he had told her, once, when she was about 22, and frustrated by some obstacle she no longer remembered, and he had said, "Lorraine, don't argue with what's already done. Do the thing. Then it's done, then no one can argue." She had been doing the thing her whole career. So had he. On Thursday at 10 in the morning, Lorraine Asante Webb would sit across from Bertrand Marcoux and Edmund Cresswell and 3 representatives of the community organizations named in her father's trust, and she would sign her name at the bottom of 32 pages of legal documentation, and the Hartwell Club would stop being the Hartwell Club, and the room on the second floor where they hadn't wanted Kwame Asante would become, in time, something porous, something that lets people in. She turned up her collar against the wind and kept walking. If you've ever sat in a room where someone decided, before you opened your mouth, that you didn't belong, you know exactly what Lorraine felt in that lobby. And if you've ever watched someone respond to that, with the kind of quiet that isn't weakness, the kind that comes from knowing exactly what you're carrying, you know what her father was. Drop a comment and tell us. Have you ever been in a room where someone underestimated what you were holding? And if this story stayed with you, hit like and subscribe to Heirloom Tales, because every week, we find the stories that deserve to be remembered.